Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you're having a wonderful start to your Monday. As always, myself, Shawn Coleman, and my co-host, DaMichael Cole. DaMichael, how are you this evening, sir? Or, excuse me, this morning?
I'm doing great, Shawn. It was a great weekend. It was a fast weekend, and 2 days without Grizzlies basketball. We haven't had too many weekends like that. So I hope the fans got some downtime, kind of like we did. I just took a lot of time just to do some things, personally that I wanted to get done without the rigors of the NBA schedule conflicting that. So that was good, Shawn.
Agreed completely. And of course, you're right. It was, the thing that I'll say is that we all are prepared right now, to where there's, the Grizzlies are going to play 4 times this upcoming week. None of the games are going to mean anything because the Grizzlies are already locked in to their playoff position. But that doesn't mean there isn't a lot to look forward to. And we've got you covered in the show. In today's show, we're going to talk about the Suns' victory, but arguably the biggest victory of the season, and why it really does prove that the Grizzlies style of basketball can work in playoff settings. Plus, a few things to look forward to this week when it comes to the Grizzlies, based off who they potentially can play in the first round of the playoffs, and looking at Desmond Bane, his improvements, not just in his shooting and scoring, it goes well beyond that. But DaMichael, let's get right into it. And, we'll tell you a bit more where you can find me and DaMichael's work elsewhere. Let's get right into it from Friday night. Arguably the most impressive victory of the season for the Grizzlies against the Suns. Just your thoughts. To me, the biggest takeaway was the Grizzlies can establish their style of basketball anytime they want to right now. What else did you take away from that win on Friday night?
I mean, almost similarly to what you just said, the Grizzlies style of basketball, there's a set formula there. And, personnel-wise, I think a lot of people focus on the fact that a lot of the starters were removed. But, I mean, the pieces that they still had playing, DeAnthony Melton, who we've said, one of the hottest shooters in the NBA right now, Kyle Anderson, great defender. DeAnthony Melton, along with that shooting, great defense. Dillon Brooks was Dillon Brooks, and he played, he finally reached that 35-minute mark. And, Xavier Tillman is not as much this season, but he's played a lot of big minutes for this team in the past. These were all battle-tested guys, Zaire Williams even, it started for a long stretch. So all these guys were battle-tested players. And the only problem you will wonder about was depth. And that turned out that didn't be that big of an issue when you got Santi Aldama coming down the sideline, throwing down reverse dunks, Shawn. They has the bench going crazy. But my main takeaway was the system is so strong. We focus a lot on point guards in the NBA because the league has become so pick and roll, ball dominant heavy. Well, with the Grizzlies motion offense, and the Grizzlies run almost as much pick and roll as a lot of the top teams. They run a lot of pick and roll. Don't get me wrong when I say this. But the Grizzlies and Taylor Jenkins have an ability to adapt and play, this type of offense where the ball is moving at least 5 times throughout a possession. And that makes things really, really easy. I mean, there was no straight up point. There was no Tyus Jones. There was no John Morant. There wasn't even a Desmond Bane, who had been playing the third point guard role, the second point guard role behind Tyus Jones. They had to find ways to create opportunities for each other, and they still churn out 30 assists. That's a credit to Taylor Jenkins. That's a credit to the way they play on the offensive end. I didn't expect a big drop-off defensively because I've said it, time and time again, Shawn. I think actually the best defenders on this team, when you talk about groupings, is the bench. And the numbers almost in a way, when you look at the steals, the loose balls, forced deflections and all that, DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Brandon Clark, those guys' hands are all over those numbers too. But my biggest takeaway was how they moved the ball without a starting point guard, without a backup point guard, without Tyrell Terry. I mean, none of the point guards were there, but DeAnthony Melton, Dillon Brooks, 7 assists. It was a really good team effort from that standing point. And that made me think, Shawn, when the playoffs come, when the Grizzlies play their pick and roll and it's not working, they have something to go back onto, and they won't just, stall like a lot of offenses do in the postseason.
Since the start of the 2020 calendar year, we're going back now nearly 27 months. There have been 51 times that the Grizzlies have had 30 assists in a game. DaMichael, do you want to guess how many times they've lost out of those 51 games?
Shawn, I'm going to take a guess because I know this season they're doing pretty good. So I'll say in 51 games, let's go 49-2.
So so it's very close. They are actually 47-4 over those 51 games that they have gotten 30 plus assists. 2 of those games went into overtime that they eventually lost. The Grizzlies have now won 31 straight games under Taylor Jenkins, regulation games. They won 31 straight regulation games when they have 30 plus assists. And the reason why, again, is because they're going to find success on the run. You know that they're going to find success in the paint. But when they also are complementing it with good ball movement, they're consistently finding the best shot possible, and that's what helps them out. But to your point, the style of the Grizzlies working. The other thing to take away from this game is that the Grizzlies overall, their defense itself struggled at times. The Suns shot over 50%. The Grizzlies only made 7 threes and shot less than 30% from 3. This is the type of setup that, I'll be honest with you, I can only speak for myself, I'm concerned about happening in the playoffs, because these type of games you typically don't see the team that shoots less than 30% and allows the other team to shoot better than 50%. That's usually not a good formula for winning. But what made up for it? 54-9 on Friday night. The Grizzlies had 54 combined second chance points and points off turnovers. The Suns had 9. And it was all because of 17 more shot possessions for the Grizzlies. If the Grizzlies can get more possessions, especially early on in these games, they have an avenue to take even if the shooting is not there.
That's kind of the whole key to their style of play. Like that whole thing with, causing turnovers and creating easy points with second chance opportunities. That's been a theme of theirs throughout the season. And Shawn, going back to you saying that that's something that concerns you, I would say me too, but in a lesser degree. It's not the biggest concern because at the end of the day, you can shoot 42%, but if you're snagging offensive rebounds the way they are, which they've done all season long, there's no data out there that suggests that when the postseason comes, they won't be dominant on the glass on the offensive boards. So I expect them to still be able to do that. So we've seen them have some games where they shoot less than the opponent. Now, the Suns number was pretty high, over 50% from the field. That's pretty high, but I believe at one point, I'm not sure what the exact number is now, but as of about a month ago, the Grizzlies were middle of the pack in defensive field goal percentage. I believe they were 17th in the NBA. And, they're number 1 in steals, which they still are. They were number 1 in blocks, which they still are. They were top 2, top 3 in deflections, loose balls recovered. So it's like they play. It's one of the biggest difference between the grit and grind defenses and this defense. Because you look at the defensive ratings, defensive efficiency, this is still one of the top defenses. But you just look at raw shooting numbers, it doesn't show it as much. But what does show it is they get a lot of steals, they get a lot of blocks, they're getting deflections, they're getting loose balls, and those lead to easy opportunities on the other end, which benefits this team. They don't have a lot of isolation guys. The Grizzlies don't. They don't have a lot of guys you can just throw the ball to and say, everyone move out of the way. Like some teams, at the top of the league have multiple options that can do that. The Grizzlies don't have as many. But what the Grizzlies make up for it is, like I just said, they're top in steals, they're top in blocks. They create those easy opportunities just about as well as anyone, Shawn.
And to your point, the secret to the Grizzlies' success on defense is activity. They probably are the most active, most effectively active team in the league when it comes to defense. They're not necessarily one of the best defenses when it comes to lockdown, swarming mentality, limiting, the good shot opportunities on their opponents. So sure, you're right as far as the defense goes. But the other thing that stood out to me in this game, and we've seen, DaMichael, the Grizzlies find success in this type of setup. Devin Booker had 41 points on 17 of 28 shooting. He was absolutely outstanding. But the big key is, and this could be a philosophy at times that could work for the Grizzlies, the big key is the Grizzlies didn't let anybody else cook. They didn't let anybody else take over for stretches other than Booker, and they kept Chris Paul from really dictating how the game went, as well as keeping DeAndre Ayton quiet on the offensive end as well. The whole point I'm getting at is there may be times when you face a team in the playoffs, you let the guy who you expect to cook, but as long as nobody else is having a really big game as well, that could really play into the Grizzlies' favor from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, in the playoffs, you throw some weird, looks out there and some different things, and that is something I think we could see. Them saying, "Hey, look, Dillon Brooks has that guy, and they're 1-on-1, but we're going to take away everything else." I could see them doing that, and even with Devin Booker's 41, that's one of those 41s. If you didn't watch the game, it wasn't some super, like, oh man, they just have no answer for Devin Booker type 41. A lot of those points, as you saw, Shawn, those last 2 minutes when, the Suns tried to make that comeback, Devin Booker knocked down a couple threes, knocked down a layup. I believe he probably scored 10 to 12 of his points in that last 2 minutes. But throughout the game, I will say this, Devin Booker was not super comfortable. The stats show you one thing, but as someone who was sitting right there, Devin Booker was talking to the referees a lot. Dillon Brooks, and it's all Dillon Brooks. It's a lot of things where I try to write this to readers, but it's easier to say. The way Dillon Brooks, the savviness, the smarts inside the game, he is very elite at that, because what he was doing to Devin Booker, and he's done this to a lot of guys, but I think it just stood out more to me when it was against Devin Booker, because one, they've played against each other a lot, so Booker expects it. Two, Booker's been in the league 7 years now, so he's not some new kid on the block. And he's just, bodying him up, grabbing his jersey a little bit, tipping on it when the referee isn't looking, or when they're walking, when they're jogging back up at the court and no one's thinking of anything, he just gives them a little slight bump on his way, going past him up the court. Nothing too major, nothing where he can flop or anything like that. Just a little nudge, just to let you know, yeah, I'm still right here. Or when they're coming out of a timeout, before, when the TV is still on commercial, and Devin Booker is walking up the court, to go to the corner 3-point line or something, while Chris Paul is about to bring the ball up the court. Well, while the other Grizzlies players are huddled up, Dillon Brooks leaves the huddle and he's going straight where Devin Booker going, and he just tracks him all the way down. It's just those little annoying things where you really can make a guy uncomfortable. And how I knew that Devin Booker was uncomfortable, because Devin Booker wasn't aggressively, just calling for the ball, because he was making shots, right? But it was happening just casually throughout the game. It was more of a quiet 25, 26, 27, 28 points until he got, those last 10 or so points in that last minute that gave him 41. But I think Dillon Brooks did a solid job on him. And Dillon Brooks is, the way he plays defense, you almost laugh at, the smarts that he displays. But yeah, that strategy that you're talking about is something I definitely can see them doing, because they have, the way the team plays defense, they have the ability to make sure that a team isn't having, 4 guys score 15 points or 3 guys score 20 points.
Absolutely. And of course, with the potential of who the Grizzlies are going to play in the playoffs, either the Clippers or the Timberwolves, it's looking more than likely being able to really keep multiple guys from either team going off is going to be a huge, huge task for the Grizzlies. We'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, want to talk with you a bit about Built Bar. Now, you hear us talk about this 3 to 4 times a week, but the reason why is because it's so good. And now Built Bar is coming out with even better flavors. If I remember correctly, I believe that I saw brownie batter dip Built Puffs now. And I almost ascended to heaven, because that sounds like one of the best tasting ideas I've ever heard. You can have bars, you can have puffs. There's many different things you can get at built.com. Choose from over 18 different flavors. Put in the promo code LOCKED15. Having them in the morning for breakfast, in the afternoon as a snack, whenever you choose to enjoy it, it's going to make your day better. Again, go to built.com right now. Put in the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. It's the final week of the NBA season, and of course you're going to be locked in to Locked On Grizzlies, but at your second listen of the day, make sure you check out the Locked On NBA podcast as well, simply to get all the latest news from around the league when it comes to many different playoff matchups, injuries, what have you. Locked On NBA is going to be the best place for you to be to get the latest around the league. Check out Locked On NBA as your second listen of the day after Locked On Grizzlies. So, DaMichael, it's not all good news on the Grizzlies' end. I wish that I had the funeral procession going right now, because we could have a impromptu ceremony for what was the hope. Of course, I'm talking about the Lakers pick from the summer trade that sent Jonas to New Orleans, and Steven, and Eric Bledsoe was a Grizzly for about 2 minutes, and then the number 10 pick, obviously. Listen, that trade was still a success overall, but DaMichael, the Lakers just cannot find a win, and at the time of this recording, it's all but done. Like that Lakers pick, unfortunately, it just does not look like it's going to be a thing this summer.
It's going to take a miracle, Shawn. It's really going to take a miracle, and I mean, the Lakers have bottomed out. I think when we saw LeBron James and Anthony Davis play against the Pelicans and Russell Westbrook, and they still lost, that's when I was like, man, this team's hit a new low. I believe they're 31-47 right now. In their schedule, they don't have an easy schedule remaining. The Spurs are up 2 whole games, and if you do the math, it's really 3, because the Spurs have the tiebreaker. Both teams only have 4 games left. So you're talking 3-1 at least is what the Lakers will need to happen. And in that case, you want the Spurs to lose all of their games remaining. Well, we'll get to the Spurs losing all those games. It's possible. It's definitely possible, because they don't have an easy game remaining on their schedule. But the Lakers have to win 3 out of 4, and we're talking a game against Phoenix coming up on Tuesday, going to Phoenix, by the way. Then they have Golden State, who's battling the Mavs right now for that 3 seed. That game's going to be important. And they have a game against OKC, very winnable game. And then they end the season with Denver, who just beat them by double digits. And Denver may not be playing for anything at that point. So those last 2 games are the ones I would expect the Lakers to win. But before you get to that, you got Phoenix Tuesday, Golden State Thursday. Golden State is definitely going to be playing for something. Phoenix has lost 2 in a row against the Grizzlies C team and against Oklahoma City C team. I don't think the Suns are probably going to try to meld this one in too, because you don't want to, establish a losing streak going into the postseason. I think the Suns will come out to play. I think Golden State will come out to play. And the Lakers will have to at least split those. I mean, if they don't split those games, Shawn, it's going to be really tough, because you look at the Spurs schedule, and from that standpoint, the Lakers have a chance. The Grizzlies have a chance of keeping the pick, because they have Denver Tuesday. We just talked about, Denver's probably going to play their guys that game. Minnesota after that, Golden State Saturday, Dallas on Sunday. I think Golden State and Dallas will be playing down to the wire when it comes to that 3 seed, 4 seed battle. So each of those games, none of those games, the Spurs will be favorited in. It's possible, Shawn, but at this point, Grizzlies fans, like you said, just don't get your hopes up. How do you feel about it, Shawn?
No, I completely agree. And I haven't really worried about it that much, just because I thought that at some point the Lakers would go on their run. But the other thing that none of us really could have expected, you kind of got the hint that New Orleans would kind of take off a bit once they made the trade for McCollum, when they wanted to still try to be competitive. But let's look at it. The Wizards, the Knicks, the Pelicans, the Spurs, all 4 of those teams, probably 3 of those 4 teams shouldn't be doing this, because they should be trying to get a highest pick as possible. But all 4 of those teams have been 4 of the top, 12 or 13 teams in the league over basically the past 2 or 3 weeks. Right. And the Lakers continued to struggle. So that's one thing that none of us really had, on the radar, was that these other teams would take off while the Lakers still struggle. But it is what it is. And at this point, listen, not everything can work out to your favor in the NBA. But DaMichael, let's shift the focus to the Grizzlies, obviously, who do have a pretty tough schedule themselves. Tomorrow night, they'll be in Utah. Thursday night, they'll be in Denver. Then coming back home this weekend, the upcoming weekend, for games against the Pelicans as well as the Celtics. Now, obviously, things on the radar that we're looking for. good returns to health for the starters, especially Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant. But obviously, also, I think the Grizzlies are going to take opportunities to rest folks, but I really want to see some things work out for the Grizzlies. But before I get to that, what are one or two things this week you're looking forward to besides the obvious, DaMichael? Obviously, a return to health for everybody, but what are one or two things you're really focused on when it comes to the Grizzlies' final tune-up before the playoffs?
Shawn, I'm a big rotation guy. I want to see who plays with who and how they play. I think that's going to be the most telling factor. Even when guys are in and out of the lineup, Taylor Jenkins is very smart. Taylor Jenkins knows who he's starting, particularly when another player is out, because he's trying to think about those max matches in the third quarter with 4 minutes left, who he wants to have in the game, or in the second quarter when it's a tie game and you don't have John Morant in for the first 6 minutes, who do you want to have in that lineup and things like that. So I think this final stretch, that's the biggest thing that I'm looking for. I think conditioning-wise, this team is there. We just talked about Dillon Brooks, the 35-minute mark. Of course, everyone will do the whole talk about rhythm. That's pretty much with every team. But specifically with the Grizzlies, they have a lot of bodies. You can look at the Mavericks right now and you say, oh, I know what their top 9 will be. You can look at the Suns. You can say, I know what the Suns' top 9 will be. Golden State, they have a few bodies, but for a fact what their, final 5, 6 guys, their top is pretty much set with all these teams. With the Grizzlies, there are going to be some tough decisions to be made because so I think we both can say you want John Morant on the court 40 minutes if D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards are going to be playing 40 minutes. But you want Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones hasn't done anything to relinquish a spot. You want him on the court too. Well, DeAnthony Melton's been one of the hottest shooters. You want him on the court. But Dillon Brooks, that defense, the way he's playing, you don't want to take him off the court with Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell on the other end, or potentially Paul George and Reggie Jackson and Norman Powell, or all those names possibly being on the other end. You don't want to take Dillon Brooks out for that long too. So how will he mix and match these? I think these last 4 games will be really telling on what type of ideas that Taylor Jenkins has. You just have to pay attention. It's not going to be the first quarter. It's not going to be the end at the fourth quarter. It's everything in between. In the second quarter, when he makes those 2 to 3 subs. In the third quarter, when he makes those 2 to 3 subs. Who does he pair with who? Is it consistent? And once you see those consistencies in those pairings, that's the rotation that you can expect for the playoffs.
Agreed. And I think that the rotation is certainly going to be something that makes sense. And the great thing about having all these bodies is you can change up the rotations based off how the game flow is going. A couple of things I'm looking forward to. DeAnthony Melton staying hot because, when we look ahead, and I know, again, we're 2 weeks away from the playoffs starting, but when we look ahead, you look at potential matchups against the Clippers and you look at potential matchups against the Timberwolves. One big thing that both teams have in common, they both have a bench sniper. Luke Kennard for the Clippers when he's not starting, Malik Beasley for the Minnesota Timberwolves. DeAnthony Melton has been on their level over the past 2 to 3 weeks. Can he continue to do that, in which will play a big role in the Grizzlies series? Give them something else where the other team doesn't have an advantage. That's one thing I'm looking at. And also the defense. Can the defense be able to consistently defend the three-point shot well? Again, the activity, from an activity perspective, the Grizzlies are doing great, but can they defend the 3 well? Those are a couple of things that I'm looking forward to as well. And I'll tell you this, I'm looking forward to when Desmond Bane gets back on the court as well. We're talking about these players who need to come back from injury. We're going to talk about him in just a moment. But DaMichael, let me ask you this question. How fun was it for you to watch the Final Four on Saturday?
Shawn, I had a great time. I think us as a nation, I won't speak for everyone, but for the majority of the nation, watching Duke lose is always fun. And then, it's extra icing on the cake. North Carolina was my childhood team as well growing up. I watched, Raymond Felton, Rashad McCants, Sean May, Tyler Hansborough, Danny Green, Wayne Ellington, Ty Lawson, that whole shebang. So that added a little extra onto it as well. And then, Kansas beating Villanova. I was in Philly at the Philadelphia Inquirer for a while, so I kind of, started to know some of those Villanova guys a little bit. And it was tough seeing, their season end like that without one of their best players, even being able to play in the game towards Achilles. reportedly. I believe it was Justin Moore. But, so from that perspective, I think we get an all blue blood final. I think it's pretty cool. Some people want to, like in the past, we see Baylor in championship game and Texas Tech and Virginia and those type schools in these national championships. That's been fun. I mean, it's been really great for college basketball and the parity. But at the end of the day, these two programs that we see in this game, they've been mainstays pretty much for my entire life. So it's going to be fun to watch. And, you look for those storylines. Shawn, how about this one? Roy Williams, he didn't do the whole farewell tour that Coach K did. Last year, he kind of just went off silently into the sunset. Roy Williams, made his name as the head coach at Kansas and then came to North Carolina, won some championships. So he's going to be at that game. I'm sure he's going to be North Carolina through and through, but I think that's just an interesting perspective too. But yeah.
Agreed. And the thing about it is that it's crazy that, I kind of out of nowhere, the college basketball season is over. But I agree with you. Kansas, North Carolina is always going to be fun. Who are you going to bet on, though, is I'm sure that's going to be asked a lot of times during water cooler talk coming up later on today. But the thing that I'll say this, that there's an easy way you want to be able to bet and wager on sports, no matter if it's college basketball, pro basketball, hockey, UFC, boxing, baseball coming up. BetOnline.net is the best way for you to do it. Go on your mobile device or your laptop. Go to BetOnline, new interface, great interface, gives so many different odds on so many different things, plus Vegas casino games. If you enjoy wagering and betting on sports, you want to go to a place that makes it simple and easy for you, and that's BetOnline.net. Check it out the next time you're ready to wager and bet on your favorite sports teams. I bet that I can't talk right now, so I would wager, and I'm going to give DaMichael Cole the opportunity to do just that. Can't thank you enough for listening to us here at Locked on Grizzlies. Obviously, on tomorrow's show, we will preview a game versus the Utah Jazz. A little bit of fun going back to Utah, where before the Grizzlies enter the playoffs as the number 2 seed, they return to the place where they gained their first experience in terms of this generation of the Grizzlies against the Jazz. That and much more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked on Grizzlies podcast. But one other thing, DaMichael, that I want to discuss before we head out for today is Desmond Bane. Now, Desmond Bane, he's been talked about in the most improved player conversation. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case. But what I will say is this, is that Desmond Bane certainly has been one of the most improved players this season. But the question I'll ask you is this, DaMichael. When it comes to Desmond Bane, we obviously know the shooting has been his calling card. It's his strength, his superpower. That's where the majority of his value lies. But outside of that, what part of his game has impressed you the most in terms of his improvements?
It's the playmaking. Playmaking it's what I wrote about. It's, what I've talked about, just him being that guy when John Morant went out to step up as that second, point guard running the second unit. It's been big, and I've talked so detailed with him about this, just, how he breaks down the film as the backup point guard. He's talked about that and how, he has to have a better idea of where everyone is. And then there's the dribbling aspect. He doesn't have the tightest dribble in the world, but he's talked about, that's something he's working on, tightening up his drill. I mean, luckily, for Desmond Bane, in his case, he's a big, burly guy, so he can use his body a la, a lot of bigger dribbles do it, like LeBron James do for the most part. So taking care of the ball, he's done that. His playmaking has really improved. And, I mean, some people will say he even had this, but as we saw from Summer League to early in the season when John Morant was first out in that stretch to now, he's grown exponentially in that area. And that's going to be big because we might not see it as much this season, or, Taylor Jenkins might bring out more in the playoffs. But John Morant, when he's on the floor with Desmond Bane, a lot of times Desmond Bane is, spotting up and going to a place to get an open shot. And it works because when John Morant gets downhill, they're collapsing. But you can kind of have another playoff for that where you can use Desmond Bane as more of your secondary facilitator, and you get a lot more things like backdoor cuts for John Morant and, a lot of easier scoring opportunities for John Morant too, besides him just, going downhill and doing all his fancy spin layups in between two defenders and things like that. But that's where I've seen his most improvement, Shawn. I think There are other areas where I want to see more, but that is the top area right now. His playmaking is on another level.
Absolutely. Before the All-Star break, I think I mentioned it on here before the All-Star break, and this will come out in a piece that I have over at Grizzly Bear Blues today. Before the All-Star break, 140 assists to 90 turnovers, 1.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. Since the All-Star break, over his past 18 games, Desmond Bane has 63 assists to 16 turnovers, a 4 to 1 assist to turnover ratio.
That's a big difference.
That's the improvement that we've seen. Another thing, though, to your point, that I'll add to it, the overall resourcefulness of Desmond Bane on offense has really improved. We want to talk about the fact that his performance at the rim this year, 61% last year of his shots were made when it was at the rim, 66 are being made this year. 42% he made from mid-range last year, 46% this year. He also has seen a 10% decline, both in terms of his assisted two-pointers and assisted three-pointers. What that means is, to your point, his ball handling is allowing for him to grow confidence and being able to be a shot creator. But the overall thing that stands out in a couple of different levels to me is just how much the Grizzlies are benefiting from Desmond Bane. His complementary style of play to what John Morant does. John Morant being able to put pressure on the paint, Desmond Bane being able to take advantage of it by hitting shots from distance. They're perfect complements to each other. And what that allows for Desmond Bane to be able to consistently do for the Grizzlies is it helps them be able to frequently find the best shot option when they have an offensive possession. That is such a huge, huge benefit that the Grizzlies have not had in the past, DaMichael, but they do now because of how well Bane and John Morant are playing off each other. And to be honest with you, they're one of the best backcourts in the NBA, which is going to be a huge, huge need for the Grizzlies come the playoffs.
That's going to be a discussion over the next few years, as they grow together and reach new levels, because they play so well off each other. With a lot of backcourts, you see a lot of two-ball dominant guys, and you wonder, how can this work? Or he has to make sure he gets his opportunities, then give the opportunities to the other guy. These two do it seamlessly. I mean, just to put it in perspective, I think it was Desmond Bane's first 3 career 30-point games. He was not the leading scorer in each of those games because John Morant outscored him in each of those games. And that just goes to show, that's complementary basketball to a T, whereas we see it a lot of times. If Paul George has 35, Kawhi Leonard more than likely is sitting at around 25. Or if LeBron James has 38, Anthony Davis is probably around 25. Well, every time Desmond Bane, when John Morant was playing, at least every time he was reaching 30 points, John Morant was right up there with him. It's because when Desmond Bane is playing that well, more than likely it means John Morant is getting into the paint a lot, which means John Morant will get his opportunities, Desmond Bane will get his opportunities. They play so well off of each other. It's going to be fun to watch for a long time. But tell you what, in the postseason specifically, those are going to be two guys you don't want to have off the court that much because of that complementary style of basketball they play.
And to your point, on back-to-back Mondays earlier this season, both games in which the Grizzlies beat the Nets on the road with Harden and Durant, and then the next Monday they beat the Suns on the road with Booker and Paul. Desmond Bane and John Morant both had combined for more than 30 points. It's going to be very good to see. But the whole point of all this is, DaMichael, is that, listen, Desmond Bane may not win most improved player. And if he doesn't, that's fine. There may be other players out there who have better cases. But the whole key to this is that the development of Desmond Bane isn't just his shooting. Yes, again, that's where he's going to make his money. That's where his value is. But his resourcefulness as an offensive player is what really stands out. DaMichael, you got anything for us as we head out for this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies?
Shawn, that's it. We're entering the final stretch. We got a lot of good content coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick with us. I know Shawn is doing a lot of great work. I'm going to do a couple nice things myself as well going into this last stretch. So stay tuned, and we're going to have it all here on Locked On Grizzlies.
He's exactly correct. Of course, you can find DaMichael at DaMichael C on Twitter, myself at StatsSAC. The show wherever podcasts are available, free on all platforms, and right here on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoy the show, and hey, lets it be more available for others who enjoy Grizzlies content as well. For DaMichael Cole, as always, partner, it's been a lot of fun. Hope you have a great Monday. And obviously on my end, for me, Shawn Coleman, thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.